Welcome on into the Utah Blockcast. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah Insider for KSL Sports. Man, oh man, it's good to be back behind the mic this week. Starting to do these things a little more regularly, and that's going to be the plan moving forward as we get closer to college football, doing these more and more. Starting to get that itch. College football is right around the corner. Starting to do some content planning and podcast planning. You can see all this here. All of this here. Am I doing that right? Yeah, this right here. I got a whiteboard. Just content plans galore, man. So getting excited for college football. The season is right around the corner. We are less than 2 weeks away from Camp Kyle 2025 kicking off. So excited about that. On today's episode, I actually had, the fortune of bringing on the Athletics' Tobias Bass to actually talk some college basketball, some Utah basketball specifically, and the Big 12 conference overall. So we had a good 20-minute conversation. It was good to get his perspective. He's been, covering college basketball for a handful of years now, and is actually really connected within the Big 12. And so, really, really excited to have gotten him on the show, and we'll talk to him more. We'll welcome him back. He was a good interview, a good conversation to have. So excited about that. But like I said, we are getting close to college football, and so on today's show, going to continue the fall camp position group previews, and we're going to start there with the defensive tackle room, and we're just going to get right into it because I want to get to that conversation with Tobias Bass. But let's talk defensive tackles and Utah defensive tackles specifically, because this is a very different group. This is a group in transition, right? So you no longer have Junior Tafuna, Samote Pepa, Tavita Fotu, and that other defensive tackle, Keanu Taravasa, on the roster. Utah, how do they respond in terms of bringing in the players that they need to help rebuild the depth? They went heavy on the young guys, on the freshmen. They brought in 5 freshmen this past signing class, and those guys are going to be important to rebuilding this unit. So, that's sort of the key. And, last week, Kyle Whittingham basically laid it out pretty plainly that they're going to need 3 of these freshmen to be contributors, with probably 2 of them playing a pretty big role. So this group of freshmen, they're going to be counted on to play a significant role for Utah this season. And I think there are a few guys that come to mind that can really help Utah. So I think that's a really encouraging thing. And so, before we get into the fall camp conversation, let's go back to spring ball, sort of revisit what happened with the group there and what sort of progress they made. And, again, just kind of highlighting, the players that departed and are no longer on the roster. Utah brought back 3 guys from last year's roster, Aliki Vamahi, Dallas Vakalahi, and Jonah Leaea, as well as, a couple other guys, Jory Benson and Mike Tautioli, who are walk-ons. Those were the guys that have been in the program for a few years now, know the culture, and with Aliki Vamahi coming back, that's a big one for Utah. He's been in the program, I don't even know how many years now. It's a lot, but he's obviously played a lot of football for Utah. He knows this culture. He knows the defensive mentality, and he lives it. And I think having that sort of veteran presence with this young group is actually really, really important to continue on with that culture. There's such a strong defensive culture at Utah, and I'd argue that the reason for that, the biggest contributing factor to that, is the defensive tackle room. They have a very different mindset. It is all about the other guys. It is about the team first, and those guys live it and breathe it. That is the culture of that defensive tackle room. So to have a veteran in place like Vamahi, who has been here for a lot of years, as Utah brought in, this big group of young freshmen, I think that's pretty important, pretty vital to establishing and maintaining that culture buy-in within this room. So, Vamahi was a really important player to bring back. I know that he's excited and grateful for the opportunity to run it back, given the fact that, his His year last year was cut short due to injury, but he was able to redshirt and come back, get an injury redshirt, a medical redshirt, and come back. So he's pretty excited about that. I think, but I think everybody is really excited about Dallas Vakalahi. I think he is on the short list of breakout candidates for Utah this season, and for good reason. He's 6'2", 315 pounds. He's a West product, so he's a local kid from just down the street of Rice-Eccles Stadium. And he played in 9 games, but he still only played about 250 snaps. But in those snaps, in those reps, you saw a lot of really encouraging moments from him, a lot of encouraging flashes of what he can become with more time, with more development. And I think as a true freshman last season, only coming off of his church mission 3 months prior to the season beginning, I think there should be a lot of excitement about Dallas Vakalahi. So to get him, to bring him back, to hang on to him, because there were programs, plural, a lot of programs that were hoping and pushing for him to hit the transfer portal. So, for Utah to hang on to him, to make him a big priority, I think you're looking at him to build upon year one at Utah and really take a big step forward as a defensive tackle in this program. So, he sort of established himself, kind of emerging as a leader in spring ball. I thought that was a really good development to hear from him, to hear his mindset and how he approaches leadership. And I think having him in place is pretty significant. And then a couple other key notes from spring ball. Utah got good development out of Jonah Lea'ea and Mike Tautioli, and a few others, Carson Kafusi as well, who I'm going to talk quite a bit about in this little segment. But for Jonah Lea'ea coming to Utah as a defensive end, a former basketball player, making that conversion to football, coming in as a 230 pounder, he's now up to I heard from somebody fairly recently that he's now checking in over 290 pounds. That's a big transformation to go through. And yeah, he's been with the program for a number of years, but still, I think that's an important number for him, playing above 290. And, he made physical progress during spring ball. You could see how that benefited him. And Mike Tautioli, he's a former walk-on that was put on scholarship during spring ball. Saw some good things from him. He's kind of similar to Jonah Lea'ea, but he's got a little more size. He's floating right around 300 pounds, but he's got that leaner, more athletic build. But he's a high motor type of player. I think he's worthy of a scholarship, and I think he'll help contribute to the depth this season based on what we saw from him in spring ball. And then, lastly, Carson Kafusi. Listen, if you've been following me, if you've listened to me wherever I'm talking and people ask about the defensive tackle position, Carson Kafusi has been a name that I've talked about for quite some time as a guy that I think can come in and help things. And seeing where he was at in his game in spring ball, that only helped solidify that outlook in my eyes. So that's sort of what transpired in spring ball. We saw some good development, some leadership develop from Vakalahi. We saw Vamahi's presence, what that meant for the group, having that sort of leader in the room. And then we saw good physical development from some of the other guys. So now looking ahead to fall camp, what are going to be the 3 keys for this defensive tackle room? I think number 1, Utah has to quickly identify who those 3 young guys are going to be. And so just to kind of refresh everybody's mind with that is Utah's freshman class headlined by Carson Kafusi, who I, again, talking about him quite a bit. Sione Motuapuaka, who was another early enrollee with Carson Kafusi. Semi Taualonga out of Mater Dei. He's going to be a big name to keep an eye on. And then Pupu Sepulona was the other freshman in the class. And then they also brought in Dylan Battle, a transfer from LSU during the spring portal window. And so when I look at who I think is going to emerge from that group, there are 3 guys that I sort of hone in on, and that's obviously Kafusi. I'm looking at Dylan Battle, given his stature. He's 6'2", 313 pounds, very similar to Dallas Vakalahi. And though he didn't spend the offseason with Utah, he was an early enrollee at LSU. So you know that he got coaching. You know that he was in a collegiate strength and conditioning program. So he's coming into Utah, even though he's new, even though he joined the program in the spring portal window, he's still coming in having a few months under his belt as a collegiate defensive tackle. And I think that's going to give him, an edge over some of the other guys coming in at the same time frame. And then the other guy that I think coming in among that summer group is Semi Taulonga. I think he's going to be another player on that short list that I think can contribute in year one. I think the other two, Pupu Sepulona and Sione Motuapuaka, I think those guys are probably more redshirt candidates this season. I think both need to put on some size. Both need to get stronger. Sepulona is making, a move. He's such a dynamic athlete. There's a lot of excitement around his future and potential, but he's got to get his body where it needs to be in order to be competitive in that defensive tackle spot. So again, I look at Kafusi, Battle, and Taulonga as the three young guys who I would put on the short list of guys that I think will emerge as pieces in that defensive tackle rotation. Why is it important for them to identify them quickly? Well, one, you want to get them reps to get them conditioned for the rigors of trench warfare at the collegiate level. And then two, for Coach Ellis, you want to get a feel for your rotations. You want to get a feel for, when guys need a break, who can step up, who can play this role and that sort of thing. So figuring that out, I think, is going to be a key piece. So that's key number one for me, is quickly identifying who those three young players are going to be that can help contribute to the depth at defensive tackle this season. The number two key for Utah is the physical development of Jonah Lea'ea and Mike Tautioli. Again, both are those leaner athletes, right? Think of Filippo Mokofisi from a few years back. He played a lot next to Lolo Tulele, who had your prototypical defensive tackle build. Mokofisi was sort of that leaner, more athletic type. I think that's what you're seeing in Lea'ea and Tautioli. So still, they both needed to put on, I think, a little bit more weight between, the time spring ball ended and when fall camp will begin. If Lea'ea can get to above 295, I think that would be huge for him. And if Tautioli can get closer to 305, 310, I think that would help him a lot out as well. So, because as we get into fall camp, then it becomes a conversation of maintaining that number. So I think getting to that number prior to fall camp, we'll see where they end up. But I think their physical development is going to be a key for Utah's defensive tackle outlook this season. And if they've made good progress, I think that bodes well for this defensive tackle room. And then the final key for me, and this is more geared towards Coach Ellis and his role in all of this, but I think preparing Dallas Vakalahi for a truly great breakout season is the third biggest and maybe the biggest, most important key piece in terms of the level of play, the standard, but also the ceiling that this group has. I think Dallas Vakalahi, what he showed last year, like I said, in 250 snaps, he finished the season with 10 total pressures, 2 sacks, had a couple of hurries. And I think the most important thing is that, when he got to guys, he converted those opportunities into tackles. He only had one missed tackle out of, 20 opportunities. So he had a lower missed tackle percentage, which compared to some of the other defensive tackles last year, one of which is no longer on the roster but will continue playing Big 12 football, had a 30% missed tackle rate, 31.2% to be specific. And so I think that is pretty significant for a true freshman coming in to play with the physicality that he needs to, but also capitalizing on the opportunities that were there to make plays. I think was really encouraging from him last season. And I hope and want to see Coach Ellis develop that more. I want to see more playmaking from Dallas. He's going to play a vital role in terms of the overall performance of the defensive unit. But with his raw power, with his strength and buy-in in terms of the leadership and all of those sort of things, I think Dallas Vakalahi should be on the short list of really quality defensive tackles in the Big 12 Conference. I'm really excited to see what sort of leap he can make in year 2 at Utah. And I think, like I said, Coach Ellis is going to play a really important role in getting Vakalahi to that level. So those are the big keys for me. I think, there's a lot of optimism about this group, but it's going to hinge on, obviously, the freshmen coming in. I'm really excited about Carson Kafusi and what he can be for Utah. He's 6'6", he's 300 pounds already. He's got all of the athletic qualities that you could want in a defensive tackle. Then you've got another bowling ball in Dylan Battle that I think will add to the depth behind Vakalahi specifically. And Semi Tawalonga, if you haven't watched his huddle film, go watch it. It's a lot of fun to watch him. He's able to do it. He's able to beat the opposing offensive lineman in a number of different ways. He's got incredible athleticism for his size and stature. And I think that's really exciting. And having obviously played at Mater Dei, that he's as prepared and equipped for the transition to competing against collegiate offensive linemen as a high school player can be, given the schedule that they face, the competition they face, the practices, the day in, day out grind against other D1 offensive linemen. I think will have him pretty prepared to make the transition, at Utah in year 1. So obviously players got to step up, and that's going to be a key thing for Utah during fall camp, but there are pieces in place that are really exciting. It's going to require some coaching, some development from Coach Ellis, but I think this group, there's reason to be optimistic. There are reasons to be optimistic about this group. So that's my take on the defensive tackle room. With all that said, let's go ahead, let's switch gears, and let's get to my conversation with Tobias Bass about Alex Jensen, the Runnin Utes, and the Big 12 Conference in general. Let's get to that. Joining me now, Tobias Bass of The Athletic. Tobias, man, appreciate you hopping on and giving the Utah Blockcast, some time. I know you've got a busy schedule in the summer with college football 26 dropping and everything, but I appreciate you taking some time to hop on, man.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
So let's real quick. So you are a staff editor at The Athletic, and it seems like your focus is primarily college basketball, and you've been on the forefront of a number of commitments that have included Utah basketball, picking up a couple of those, and that. So just I would be curious to hear your quick story and what you do and all of that, and just kind of get to know you a little bit.
Oh yeah, so I'm a Texas Tech alum, so we're
Oh,
rivals, per se. So yeah, I graduated December 2018, did a year of grad school. I've been working at The Athletic. I just made 3 years, like a month and a half ago. So it's been great here. It's a great company. Love working here. Everyone I work with is great. So it's been fun my past 3 years working here. So I've definitely enjoyed it. Got to cover a lot of different things. Been around for a lot of different things. So it's been definitely a blessing.
So how did you get into like college basketball scouting, recruiting, and all of that sort of stuff?
So believe it or not, I was actually kind of pushed in this direction. One of my biggest mentors. He's one of the best coaches in the women's side. He sent several, girls become McDonald's All-Americans, some are in the WNBA, etc. So I actually met him at Tech. He was one of the assistants at the time. We were playing pickup, and his daughter actually was playing his youngest one. And we were talking, about a bunch of different things. And he was like, man, I think you should like scout. And I was like, I don't know. I don't really want to do that. I just never saw myself, doing it. He's like, he would talk to us all the time for like 2 years. The pandemic happens. He calls me one day. He's like, hey, Tobias, I need you to go to this camp. you watch these high school kids. It's a McDonald's All American camp, so these are generally some of the better kids. I was like, I don't know, man. I just don't want to go. Like he's like, all right,
Yeah.
I'll pay your
Yeah,
hotel
yeah.
and I'll give you some money. If you don't like it, we'll never talk about this again. I go, I had a great time, and when I did it, I kind of felt like everything just clicked in that moment. You have one of those like the light bulb just goes off.
Yep.
It was one of those moments. I said, this is what I want to do. I just had fun
Yep.
doing it, and it's been up from there.
Man, I have a very relatable experience. That is essentially like I had the opportunity to go cover some spring practices for college football up here at Utah, and then getting more into recruiting. So I relate to that story quite a bit. Once had that opportunity, got the opportunity to go scout, and you just realize like it's a lot of fun. Like it's cool to evaluate and get to know these young guys.
Yeah, it is for sure. And you're seeing, it's not all of them will be pros, but you get to know their story,
Right.
their family, and then the ones, some of them become pros. It's like, wow, I watched that kid and he was like 15, 16 years old. Now he's a millionaire. You know what I mean? So it's very cool. The draft just happened a couple weeks ago, and like Trey Johnson, I remember watching him. He was like eighth
I was going
grade,
to ask.
and then like now he's he's a lottery pick playing for the Wizards. He's going to have a great career. Liam McNeely, etc. Like
Yeah.
it's super cool just to see him grow up. So and it happened so quickly. It's like he wasn't in high school that long ago, but I'm happy for those guys.
No, that's super awesome, and like I said, very relatable experience on my end here. So love that, dude. I that's really cool to kind of get that background, and you've kind of emerged as one of the top voices in college basketball and recruiting and that. And so I wanted to bring you on just to kind of dive into obviously the Runnin Utes and the Big 12 specifically, given your background with Texas Tech and your familiarity with the conference. I know that you've got a lot of insights and opinions into the conference itself. And so just that's a big reason why I wanted to bring you on. And so obviously this is a new era for Utah basketball and the Runnin Utes, and as they've welcomed back Alex Jensen to be the new head coach of the program, and so let's start there with Alex Jensen. When that news came down that Utah was hiring, Coach Jensen, what were your initial thoughts and reaction to that hiring?
I thought it was a good hire. I think basketball is better when Utah's good. They've had success in the past in the last decade or so. So I think he can probably definitely fix it. I think he brought in some really good people on his staff. I think that he'll be able to fix it. It's going to take some time. The fans will have to be patient, but I do think he has the right people in place, though, and he brought in some good players that have multiple years of eligibility. So I think that they do have a chance to be good in the near future.
Yeah, so let's dive into the staff. So his first hire staff addition was Coach Rafael Chilius, who you look at his pedigree and his background, his resume. Man, he's got an impressive resume as a recruiter specifically. When you saw that move, to me that was an eye-opening move, one that was not on my radar at all until it became pretty clear that that's who the first hire was going to be. Just given there wasn't a lot of connections, or at least well-known connections between Jensen and Chilius, but be curious, like your thoughts on that hire specifically and what that could potentially mean for Utah on the recruiting trail.
I really love the hire. I think he's coached like 17 players to the NBA, 10 first-round draft picks, 4 of them were lottery picks, I think, something like that. So his experience is unique because he's seen it from all levels, right? He was like an associate coach. He was in the NBA. I think he did some stuff in high school as well because
South Kent, yeah.
So he's literally seen basketball at the highest level at whatever level he was at. So I do think it was cool, and kids want to be pros. So you put NBA guys on your staff, that helps. They can help develop them. They can get people in the gym to come watch them. I think it's a significant recruiting tool. You're seeing schools all over the country, big, medium, or small, doing the same exact thing. So I think when you get a guy like that in there that knows what he's talking about, can evaluate it, I think it's just a big domino that Coach Jensen did, and I think he's really going to help him get some good players in there.
Yeah, he played a big role in a number of additions for Utah. We'll talk about the roster and that sort of stuff here in a bit. But, the next big addition on the staff was the general manager. And I would be curious more, I'd be curious on your opinion and thoughts on that, more from a big picture perspective with the general manager role. So Alex Jensen hired Wes Wilcox,
Yep.
who was an assistant general manager with
Mm-hmm.
the Sacramento Kings at the time, but brought him in to be the general manager of Utah basketball. I think that was kind of another, again, just an eye-opening hire, one that was not really anticipated until it became clear like that's who they were going to go with. But just in terms of the general manager role, especially given how this sport and college sports is evolving right before our eyes, how important is that general manager role moving forward in college basketball?
I think that all teams eventually will have one, definitely at the high major and maybe even the mid major level. I just think they're super important. I think that one, not only are you managing players, you're managing money, you're managing like a bunch of different things. So I think, the staff, they literally need help. Tech did
Yeah.
it. Tech did it. I mean, I think Buff, he's one of the best. I think he's one of the best GMs in the country. I don't say that by I really do. What he's done in 2 seasons, I think it's hard to disagree. You have several other good ones. Andrew Slater at NC State is going to do a phenomenal job, so on and so forth. So I think that you need him. And him coming
Yeah.
from, an NBA background, he was doing all of that at the highest level. So I think that you bring him to a college program, it's different, but it has a similarity. So if he can manage NBA guys with millions of dollars, I know that he can do it at a smaller level. So, and also he knows how to evaluate. He knows how to get kids in there. He's a former GM. If he knows what a pro looks like, he knows what good
Yeah.
look like. So you have him and Chillis in there. That could be a potential dynamic duo that can get Utah off and running.
Yeah, and that was really, I mean, you said it there. Like, I think that's why Coach Jensen, made those two specifically his first two hires, with his new staff, because I do think, given Coach Chilius' relationships, his history, and past connections, that played a role in who they were able to go after, and then with Wes Wilcox's experience as a general manager and his experience in negotiations, I think that played a role in who they landed as well. So um, that's going to be interesting. So let's dive into the roster and some of the additions that Utah made. Obviously, it starts with who they brought back from that roster, and let's start with Keanu Dawes and how important he's going to be for Utah this season. He emerged as a double threat late in the year for Utah in Big 12 conference play. What did you make of Keanu Dawes' emergence, and how important is he going to be for Utah this season?
So Keanu he was born in Utah, but he went to high school out here in Houston. So I watched him.
Right.
He's another one of those kids. I just really watched him grow up. So I think for him, when you can get local kids to come and stay, I think it matters because it means a little bit more. When you get to play for the big state school, it just matters a little bit more to them. They probably dreamed of playing for Utah one day. So I think that's one. He's now a junior, so he has that college experience, and he'll be good for the culture. Keanu's a very mild-mannered, good. He's an overall good dude, good human being. So I think he's very good for the culture. And getting him to stay, because he could have left, but he wanted
Oh
to
yeah.
be here, and I think that's the biggest thing. He wanted to be here, and the staff wanted him back as well. So I do think that's a big deal going forward.
How important is his production going to be for Utah? Like, what do you sort of anticipate? His leap. I think he averaged about 9 points,
Yeah.
6 rebounds this past season. What sort of leap do we typically see? Specifically in the Big 12 for guys that are entering that third year.
Just I think the biggest thing will just be confidence will continue to grow and just the consistency, right? You did that, towards in conference play. Can you do better? We can do that every single night because they're going to rely on him. Again, he's the only one of the only returners, I think, or the only returner coming back. So they're going to need. I think it'll just be the consistency, and I think he'll be able to take some version of a leap this year. I think he will.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think he'll be kind of set up as number one, maybe number two option for Utah this season, and they'll try to work through him. But let's talk about obviously it was a pretty eventful couple of months for Utah in the transfer portal, putting in a lot of work and bringing in a number of additions. When you look at the list of guys that they brought in from the transfer portal, where do your eyes go first in terms of who stands out as a potential key cog for Utah, and who do you, I guess, just are most impressed by who they brought in?
I think one was like Elijah Moore from Syracuse. That I thought that was a really big one. What I liked is he has multiple years of eligibility. Same with Ja'Kai
Yeah.
Howard. Those are guys that'll you can have them because the portal, how it is. Sometimes it gives, sometimes it takes it away. So when
Yep.
you have guys that they have the opportunity to come back multiple years. It's not saying they will, but they can. That
Yeah.
because you going forward, you don't have to worry about a point guard anymore. You don't have to worry about this position group anymore. So that really helps you. And I think that's what you have to do to be able to win. You can't take a bunch of old dudes every time. You have to take some younger guys. I think you look at a team like U of H. They don't bring in all these old dudes at the time. They get high school
Right.
kids and they bring in kids with multiple years of eligibility, and they're good every single year. And I think that's the model. And I think schools like that, Virginia in the past, Villanova in the past, have done the same thing. That's why teams like that, at least Houston, they've been so good the last several years.
Yeah, and that's interesting. That was a point of focus for Coach Jensen and Wilcox, and who they wanted to bring in, were guys that had multiple years of eligibility because, this is about building something and having guys that at least, have some experience that can come in and play right away, but also have those multiple years who you can build with and develop over time. Obviously, you're going to have to retain them, hold on to them going into year 2 and year 3. But that was a point of emphasis for the staff is targeting guys that had multiple years.
Yep.
One thing that I wanted to ask you about Utah, Coach Jensen, this is a different looking backcourt than what we've seen over the years, recent years under Craig Smith, and specifically last season with the guards that Coach Smith had in Mike Sheriff-Johns and Miro Little.
Yep.
Utah with Coach Jensen and Wilcox really emphasized athleticism and guys that are able to get into the paint and get downhill. How important is that? I think that was kind of a big lesson for me in the Big 12 was the athleticism in the backcourt and adding these guys. How important is that in the Big 12?
I think it really matters. At the end of the day, coaches talk about, our system is so great. But at the end of the day, stuff happens, man. You got to have dudes that can really score off the bounce. When you have 6, 7, 8 seconds left, that play doesn't matter. It didn't work. Do you have someone that can just put the ball in the hole late in games? And I think that's kind of what he did. Yep, these guys are younger, but you look at like a Terrence Brown. He was able to do that at his previous school. Don McHenry, he was able to do that at his previous school. So he has some guys that I think that can do. And the league is so physical. Tech guards, U of H, they wrestle. That's just how they play. They like to wrestle.
Yeah.
Be prepared for that. So I think that I like what he did, and I think that it makes sense just how the league is.
Yeah, I'm with you. Watching Texas Tech and watching Houston,
Yeah,
two of the more athletic, more defensive-minded programs
yeah,
in the league. It was, man, it was tough to watch. Obviously, with Utah being on the other side of the ball, but
yeah,
it was, for a basketball junkie, like it was really it was beautiful to watch. Just their defensive effort, their defensive rotations, their attention to detail, and the athleticism that they have on that end of the floor really shined. And so I think Utah leaning into that more is something that should bode well for them. At least better fit the conference as a whole.
yeah. I think so. Then I think just too, the coaching is phenomenal in the league. I mean, there's so many
Yeah,
really good coaches. They've coached at other places. They've been very successful. So nothing's going to get past these guys. So at the end of the day, you're going to need some players. You're going to need guys that can just kind of go off script sometimes, just be able to do what they're able to do. So, and I think the league this year specifically, there's a lot of young talent in this league. I don't know if I've seen it this way with like collectively as a group. I don't know if I've seen it like this before. So it's definitely going to be an interesting year.
yeah, and we're gonna get to the Big 12 here in a bit, but just last one on Utah. In a genuine rebuild like this, where essentially it's been torn down to the foundation, and Alex Jensen is basically rebuilding it from ground zero. What are the expectations? I think there's a lot of excitement for this roster, given its makeup and its potential and some of the talent rankings that we look at. I think it's clearly you feel like Utah's upgraded, but this is a brand new program, brand new team coming together. What are the realistic expectations for somebody, especially for somebody from the outside looking in?
I think the biggest thing he's going to have to establish is the culture. That is what you
Yeah,
can rely on no matter if you're good or bad. If that sucks, everything's going to fall. You know what I mean? So I
yeah,
think you have to establish culture. So whether the losses are piling up or the opposite way, that has to stand. But expectations, I think he just wants to be competitive. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
you win a decent amount of your home games. I think that matters. Can you protect home court? And it's rough, right? there's going to be stretches where you have to play Tech, Kansas, and Baylor back to back. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
There are no off nights in the Big 12, but can we build a sustainable culture, a foundation, and can we be competitive in every single game? And as they get along, because some of these dudes, they're young, like some of these, like they didn't play a lot of their previous spots. Some of them didn't. So bringing them along and seeing them get better from game to game, I think that's going to be the most important thing.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Obviously, establishing a culture, establishing an identity. Yeah, I said that this last question was the last one, but how important is that in recruiting? Having an identity and a culture, how important is that for coaches to point to, as they're recruiting top prospects?
Yeah, I mean, it's who you are, right? At the end of the day, if I'm recruiting a kid, he needs to know who you guys are, even when you're good or you're bad. I'll give you an example in different level, but the Spurs, even when they're bad, you never hear anything crazy. Culture,
yeah.
There's been seasons. I mean, they picked in the top 5 or 6 how many years in a row, but you never hear anything bad. So it's that. So you can sell that aspect to a prospect when he comes into Utah, because you have the facilities, you have the great league, you have good personnel. Who are you? And can we sell that and can we build upon it? Then I think you have to recruit those type of kids,
Right.
Know who your identity is and recruit that. I know, Jay Wright would do this when he was back then, Tony Bennett. They didn't recruit they had a certain specific niche and they stuck to that. They didn't deviate too much outside of it. So, and Jensen will do that. He'll be able to find it with his staff. But once he gets that in place, I think they'll be off the running.
Yeah, I think that is something we had the opportunity to talk with Coach Jensen Wilcox, in a kind of a unique setting, and that is something that they talked about is the importance of culture, and that is something that they've wanted to establish in their initial recruiting efforts and bringing these guys in on official visits. So I do think that is a major point of emphasis for them. So with that. Let's take a step back and take a bigger picture view of the Big 12 and what you think of the league going into the 25-26 season. How do you think this conference is shaping up? It looks like the conference has a number of contenders, but how do you view this conference?
I think it'll be one of the best basketball conferences. I know the SEC took the crown last year, but over the last few years, I think it's generally either been the Big 12 or the ACC. I think the Big 12, it has a chance to be, if not one, definitely two, the second best conference in the country this year. And like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of young talent in this league. I think 10 of the top 24 prospects in the country, incoming freshmen, are in this league. 16 of the top 100 are in the Big 12. So that's
amazing.
I don't think I've seen that. I mean, to be honest, 2 of the top 4 draft picks will probably be in this league, and Darren Peterson and Devanza. So I just think there's a lot of talent. Houston has a ton of it. Tech brought a bunch of guys back. Even like Baylor, they have to refill their entire roster, but you bring in a McDonald's All-American Tunde from California, and you bring in some kids that really can play. So I think this league's going to be loaded, and we'll see, but this may be one of the deeper, it's always been deep, but I think the worst team in this league, they may pop Kansas. They're capable. So it's a very deep league this year.
So let's talk about those incoming freshmen. I just looked, and they've got 8 of the top 20 prospects according to 24/7 Sports joining the league this season, and it's pretty evenly split among a handful of programs, with obviously BYU, Kansas represented, but Arizona, Baylor, and Houston represented pretty well in that top 20, with a number of top prospects, 3 top 10 prospects coming into the league. How do you view? I think there's obviously a lot of talk around AJ Debonsa and Darren Patterson. How do you view the incoming talent coming into this league, and who do you think sort of emerges as a potential? I shouldn't say potential. These are going to be impact players. Who do you think sets themselves apart among that group?
You told me to take out Peterson and Debonsa. I'd probably pivot to see what U of H get. I mean, you brought in 3 more in the top 24. You brought in Kingston Fleming, Chris Senack, and Isaiah Harwell. I think all those guys are going to play significant minutes, and they're going to be impactful. I think Kingston, for him, for example, he's coming into a role where, we need you to be good, man. Chris Senack, we really need you to be good. We lost some of our depth because some of those guys graduated.
Mm-hmm.
They literally need them to be good. They're probably a little younger than they've been typically, but that shows you that Sampson and company, they believe in those freshmen. They believe how good they can be, and I believe in them. I think those guys will be really really good. I think Koa Pete, he just won another gold
Yeah.
medal. He got to play for Tommy Lloyd in his gold medal run a couple weeks like last week. So I think he'll be another one. I think all these freshmen, Dwayne Aristotle, Arizona is another one. I think all these guys will definitely have impactful moments, and some of them will probably be pros.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. There's a number of guys, number of options, even beyond the top two guys. And I'd be curious. I had a conversation with the BYU insider at KSL Sports, Mitch Harper, coworker of mine, basically. And we had an interesting conversation this week at Big 12 Media Days about DeBenson and Patterson and who could potentially emerge as the freshman of the year. Obviously, there's a lot of talk around DeBenson and what he's done. But I think Patterson is probably, and Mitch Harper agreed, Patterson is probably set up to come in and be the guy more so than DeBanza this season. How do you see those two kind of playing things out this year?
Yeah, I think so, and I think what Kansas has done, he really lets his guards go, and it's just a perfect for a player like him. So I think he'll just schematically, he'll just really really thrive. Where like DeBanza, and he's obviously really good. You have Saunders. They brought a couple other couple guys at the back, so it'll help him as well. So because they have like probably a little bit better chemistry because some of their key guys came back. So I agree. I do think Peterson is set up to thrive in that way. But one, I didn't even bring him up as Sean Abiv at Cincinnati. That kid can really he can really really play. He can score at will. He's another sneaky one. Like if you see him at some point you're seeing like multiple 20 balls, I could definitely see that for him. That kid really can play.
Man, that's a good name to bring up.
Yeah.
That's another one. The number 22 player in the class. Again, just speaking to the talent coming into this league, there are a number of guys that in the top 22 that are committed to Big 12 programs.
And then the last one I'll bring up, because there's just so much talent, is Caden Edwards. He's at TCU. He's going to play a lot. He's just speed, feel, can really, really score the ball. He's one that, like, in a couple of years, I think he's a kid he may, like, lead that conference in scoring, like, in a couple of years. He can really play, and he's going to play a lot. I think I've talked to some of the staffers, like, he's going to play. Like, they're not going to be good without him. So that tells you, and they say from day one, he earned the respect of his teammates. Sometimes they have to get him to calm down because he's so, he's just so amped up and ready to go. So
yeah.
Impressive for a true freshman, only be on campus a month or two, but then have that type of respect already.
All right, and then last one, we'll get you out of here with this. But how do you view the Big 12 in terms of the contenders? Who do you think has the best chance? Obviously, Houston returning what they returned, BYU and them. But how do you view the league in terms of who are the contenders and not necessarily pretenders, but the guys, the programs behind those top tier programs?
Yeah, I think you named them. BYU will be good. I think U of H should probably be the favorite. I really like with Tech Dig. I mean, you bring back the Player of the Year, Christian Anderson. He's ready to take off. I don't know if you watched him at the U19s, but
I did. He's good.
Yeah, you could argue he might have been the best guard in the whole thing. You know what I mean? I think he may be an NBA player one day. So they brought good players, LaJuan Watts, Donovan Atwell. They're going to want to shoot the three ball. So I do think Tech is definitely right in that mix somewhere. Arizona is young, but I think they're ready. Another freshman we didn't even mention, Braden Burris. He can really, really score the ball. He really can. So I think that Iowa State, they're always tough. They brought back a good amount of their guys as well. I think that all these teams have definitely a contender. But if you told me to probably order them in like a top 3 to 5, I would go Houston 1. I personally would probably put Tech second slightly over BYU. Then I'll probably go Iowa State, Arizona, probably something like that. Then, and Kansas will be good. There's no disrespect to Kansas, but I think as of today, I think they may be a little better. And Kansas will be the next group right after.
Got you. Okay. Wow. Yeah. It's going to be interesting, man. And Utah, obviously, with their rebuild, they're again, I think you mentioned it earlier, just be in contention, just be in the conversation. And get some wins, some valuable wins along the way and all that. But certainly a long ways to go for Utah to contend at the top with what's going on with those programs and what they're doing at the top. So, Tobias, man, appreciate your time again. This has been a lot of fun. Would love to get you back on the show down the road to get your thoughts as we get closer to basketball season. But again, just appreciate your time, man.
No problem. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed the show, and whenever you're going to bring me back on, just let me know.
Yeah, dude, definitely will. Appreciate you, man. For myself, for Tobias, this has been the Utah Blockcast signing off.